Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the film from 2021, The Last Thing Mary Saw, and it's a Shudder original, and it's hitting Shudder on Thursday, January 20th. And I will tell you up front, if you've been into all this folk horror stuff, which is kind of the theme of January that Shudder's going with, just add this to your list. This isn't a film that I love, but I think it's good. And if you're into folk horror and you want to consume a lot of folk horror, especially in January with all the folk horror stuff on Shudder, just go ahead and hit this one up too, because it's a solid film. There's a lot of good stuff there. So let me get into it. Written and directed by Edoardo Vitaletti. This is the individual's first feature film, so actually really good job for a first feature film, I will say, especially because it looks really good. Lighting is a problem here and there, but it's definitely excusable because of the time period that this is set in. The time period being like 1800s, I believe, in Britain, England, the UK. That's how I'm going to take care of it. Although someone will probably still correct me. Which is fine, whatever. So yeah, it's basically back during the times of witch hunting, basically, which plays a little bit of a role in this and would make a lot of sense to people who are familiar with folk horror stuff, because that definitely slots right in there with folk horror, and that's kind of what's at play here. It has Rory Culkin in it, which if you aren't familiar with some of the stuff he's done, Lords of Chaos, Castle Rock, Intruders, Scream 4, and Signs when he was quite young. So he's a really good actor, but the biggest role in this, and the person who kind of steals the movie in a sense, is Isabel Fuhrman, who is best known for her turn as Esther in the film Orphan, which... No, I have not reviewed that yet, but I have watched it. I watched it for the first time actually last year. Really enjoyed it. Really good film. And Isabel Fuhrman, wonderful actress. Wonderful. But in general, the acting is quite good in this film. And I mean, you kind of need that when it comes to doing a period piece like this, because you need people to have like a good accent. They need to be able to talk the way that they talked back then. And I will say that they did a good job with the scripting as well as the acting, for getting that, what I know to be the dialect, getting that correct. And that's not easy, because I've actually tried to write, I have a portion of a script that I wrote with similar dialect used, and it's not easy to do that, because when you talk a certain way and you think a certain way, to try and think, talk, and write a different way, it's not natural, and it's really hard to do. It's hard to like stay in that mindset. Just saying. So once again, coming to Shudder on Thursday, January 20th. Quick synopsis of it. I basically already said it. Like, it's folk horror during witch hunting times in the UK. You know, that's kind of all you need to know, because you really shouldn't know too much about the story, honestly. Some people will sense that it has certain feelings of other folk horror films. I think one being like The Witch. I think atmosphere is kind of similar, and there are a few other things that people might kind of draw parallel between. So I don't know if there was a little inspiration taken there or not. Anyway, this is a no spoiler review. I should have said that much earlier, but yes, no spoilers. Like I said, sticking with Shudder's theme, it is folk horror for January. The film is broken into chapters lightly. I don't remember how many chapters there were to it, but I don't really think it needed the whole like chapter thing, to be honest. I mean, I understand why they probably did that, because in the very first scene of the film, one of the characters is like holding this book, and there's a lot of importance with the book. And so they then start with like, chapter 1. So like it's a tie-in to like the story of what's going on in the film and the story of what's going on in the book that was read. So it makes sense being tied in that way, but I don't think you necessarily needed to structure it that way. But it's not a problem. They go for the candlelight look, which is very, good for doing that type of film, that period piece. It makes it feel more realistic for that time frame. So for that reason, you are going to get some moments, especially when it's dark, and this film is almost all in the dark, honestly. So you do get some of those scenes where it's a little bit hard to see what's going on, which kind of sucks, but it wasn't that big of a problem for me because it felt real for the time period. So I would, you know, if it was a film that was, taking place nowadays, I would say that's a problem, but it's not. So it's much less of a problem. But that said, if you are going to watch this film, I would recommend watching it in a dark room. Have no sunlight coming in, no light going on, just a dark room. That'll make it easier to see what's going on screen. An atmosphere is dread. Jeez, I'm sorry. This is after a day of work, so I'm kind of like dragging. An atmosphere of dread is created and well maintained within the film. The overall look of it, I think, does a good job. That kind of like low candlelit look as well, and the fact that it's dark a lot of the times. The costuming, the fact that everything looks kind of like dirty, dingy, but also the music adds a lot. Which the music gets a little much from time to time, which if you've watched enough of my reviews, that kind of gets to me. But it felt like it kind of like went there and maybe like stepped its toe over the line a few times, but not super far. So it didn't bother me a lot. It was just every now and then I'd be like, we're getting a little too much here. So I would have liked some of it to kind of be brought back, but won't complain about that too much. Things really do ramp up in the film around the 35-minute mark, which I think is good for kind of moving that feeling and that atmosphere of dread a little bit further, making it a little more tense. And that is the good thing. Like, it's a slower paced film, but they do a good job of keeping that atmosphere of dread, keeping the tension going. So even though it is slower, you kind of still feel on edge for the entire film. Like, you really think that just about anything could happen. And that really, like, no place or no time in the film is safe. Like, literally, there's no safe space for anyone in the film, honestly. And I'm not going to tell you what that means deeper because this is no spoiler, but you'll get it if you've already seen the film and you're watching this review. About 1 hour and 10 minutes into the film, there is a pretty powerful monologue. That was probably my favorite moment of the film, and you'll know what I mean. About an hour and 10 minutes into it, it takes place around a dinner table, is what I'll say. And it's really good, and I think it kind of cuts to the core of what the theme and the subtext is with this film. So, yeah, really well done. And those types of those types of moments are the ones where the writing is the most important. You need to really make sure that you don't get too cliche, that the words deliver a emotional enough feeling while also getting the point through. And once again, like, that's not easy to do. So the writing is good for this script, quite good. There's some good impact with the ending of the film, but I also think that it gets kind of dragged out too long, in my opinion. And in general, I do think, even though I was saying like it's slow, but the tension's maintained, I do think there were plenty of opportunities to kind of cut it down a little bit. Now, the runtime of it is like an hour and 28 minutes, and that's with credits and everything. So I do feel like they kind of padded things a little bit to stretch it for that runtime, but it's not too bad. Me personally, it's something that bothers me when I can tell that people are padding for runtime. So I really am very sensitive to that. So I pick up on those things pretty easily, or what seems like that at play. But it's not nearly as egregious as a lot of films that I've seen. So you can tell it's being stretched a little bit, but it's not terrible. Like, it doesn't destroy the film, in my opinion. But there were some opportunities to keep this a lot tighter, and I would like to see that happen. There's definitely a feel of humanity versus nature, which fits very much into the whole folk horror thing. That's a lot of what's at play with folk horror, is humanity basically being afraid of nature, this kind of like urban versus rural situation. Even though it's not like fully urban in this situation, it's kind of like, pockets of humanity surrounded by nature, is mainly for that time period. Also, a theme of the ills of patriarchal society and its oppressive hand is one of the big things at play here, which that's another thing, especially recently, that's been showing up in folk horror films, and especially when it has to do with old religions, and that's all I'm going to say about that. But I'm not going to tell you either way, like, what's really at play here, because films like this, when I first go into them, and I recognize like this is what the type of film it is, I'm like, it's going to be either it's all kind of seeming like there's some sort of supernatural type something going on here, and it's not, or it's seeming like it and it is. And it's always these two paths. So I'm not going to tell you which way it goes or if it's even a hybrid of the two, which is always the most interesting thing. But I think it, seems unique enough as a film. It's pretty solid. So out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'll give it 3.5 stars. I was between 3 and 3.5, but I'm going to bump it to the 3.5 because Isabel Fuhrman's performance is really good. The film looks really good. The music is pretty well handled for the most part. And really that atmosphere, that feeling of dread and like maintaining tension, even though the film's a bit on the slower side. So just know though, I was between 3 and 3.5. So it was pretty close. I was like right on the middle. So if I did quarters, 3.25, but I do not. So would love to hear your thoughts on this. If you haven't watched it already, you can go watch it, come back, comment. Or if you've already watched it, go ahead and comment right now. And go ahead, we can do spoilers in the comments. So just people know, spoilers in the comments potentially. So let's get nerdy about it. Do me a quick favor though, hit subscribe if you haven't already. If you have, you are awesome, and I thank you. If you haven't, it is quick, painless, costs you no money, and literally is what keeps me motivated to do this. It's when you're doing something and you feel like no one's consuming it, that's when you start to feel like, what am I really even doing this for anymore? But when I get comments from people, when I'm getting new subscribers, that's what keeps me motivated. And I'm not making money doing this at this point or anything, so literally that's my payment, is like the satisfaction of seeing more people being like, I feel like this is worth subscribing to, and I appreciate that because I'm just a guy trying to talk about horror. Anyway, thank you very much for taking your time to check this video out, and until next time, keep it brutal.